All right, let's dive into this English vocabulary thing. Mastering it, I mean. We're all about making those words stick, right? I
Absolutely.
mean, who hasn't had that word right there on the tip of your tongue? But you just can't quite, you can't quite get it out.
Oh, yeah, it's the worst.
Yeah, it is. So we're going to try and figure that out today. How to get those words.
From short-term memory.
Yes, into that treasure vault. Long-term memory.
That's a good way to put it.
And we have some really interesting scientifically backed strategies to help. So,
It's fascinating to me how our brains, they haven't really evolved to prioritize this kind of learning, like
yeah.
language,
Mhm.
compared to survival things.
Right, like food and shelter.
Yeah.
Like our brains are still in the Stone Age.
Right, back in the cave.
But we've got these, we have tricks to make our brains think that English is as important as escaping a tiger.
Exactly. And it really boils down to, strengthening these connections in your brain. Think of it like a forest with paths. And those paths are the things that you remember, that you learn. The more you walk down that path, the clearer it becomes.
So learning a new word is kind of like forging a new path.
Yeah, exactly. And using the word more and more, you're really, stumping down that path.
You're paving it,
Yeah, making it a super highway.
making it wider.
But just glancing at that word in a textbook, it's like just seeing the entrance to the path,
Yeah.
not really going down it.
So we have to really go down that path.
We got to trek through the forest.
Yeah, okay. So before we get into those path-building strategies, let's talk about the different types of memory.
Okay.
So we have short-term memory, like that notepad in your mind, right?
Uh-huh.
Where you just jot down quick notes.
Right.
And then you have long-term memory, like a massive library. That's where all the good stuff is. Our goal is to get those words out of the notepad and into the library.
Exactly. We got to get them off the scratch paper and into the stacks.
And to do that, we have to make those words meaningful to our brains.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, think about it this way. If you meet somebody new at a party,
Mhm.
you hear their name, it might stick in your short-term memory for a bit, but if you have a really engaging conversation with that person, or they tell a funny story, you're way more likely to remember their name.
Because your brain thinks, this is important, I got to remember this.
Exactly, and it's the same for learning English. If you learn a new word in a context that you know, something that's really relevant to you, your brain is much more likely
Hold on to that.
to pay attention.
Yes. Pay attention, file it away.
So it's all about making those connections stronger.
It is. Which leads us to our first strategy, spaced repetition.
Ooh, this is a good one. This has changed how I approach learning in general, not even just for language.
Really?
Everything.
Wow.
I use spaced repetition for everything now.
Interesting.
Spaced repetition sounds very technical, but it's actually really easy. It's like a workout for your brain.
Yeah, it is.
But instead of lifting weights, you're lifting words. Lifting words, yeah.
So we're working smarter, not harder with this technique.
Exactly.
Can you explain how this forgetting curve works?
Yeah, so when we learn something new,
Mm.
our brains, they tend to forget it over time. It's just natural. If we don't actively use the information, we lose it.
And spaced repetition has a solution to this.
Yes,
So tell me about that.
it was all about timing.
Yeah.
Like, we revisit that information right before we forget it.
So you're reminding your brain right before it's about to forget.
Exactly.
Okay.
And each time, it gets a little bit easier to remember.
Because you're reinforcing those connections.
Yes, you're strengthening that pathway.
So let's say I'm learning a new set of English words. How would I actually use spaced repetition?
Okay, so let's take an example. You're learning 5 new words: meticulous, phenomenon, inevitable, nuance, and resilient.
Okay.
You would review them daily at first, then maybe every 2 days, then every 5 days, and so on.
So instead of like cramming a whole list of words, I'm strategically looking at them.
Right, you're revisiting them at specific intervals.
And these intervals are getting longer.
Exactly.
So it's not so overwhelming
Right.
because you're not trying to learn all these words at once.
And there are even apps out there, like Anki and Quizlet, that can help you. They use spaced repetition algorithms.
So they schedule your reviews.
Exactly.
That's amazing. It's like having a vocabulary trainer in your pocket.
It is.
And the research on spaced repetition is pretty impressive.
Oh yeah, the studies show that it can improve long-term retention by up to 150%.
Wow. Compared to just traditional, like, rote memorization.
Yeah, it's really a game changer.
Okay, so spaced repetition, it's a good foundation.
It is.
But we also need to get visual.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the memory palace.
Ah, the memory palace. It sounds very mysterious. It's a technique used by memory champions, right?
It is, yeah,
It sounds intimidating.
I know, but it's actually very simple. And it's super effective. It uses our natural spatial memory, which is very powerful.
Okay.
Think about it. You can probably navigate your home with your eyes closed.
Yeah, I can.
Like,
That's true.
because you have this mental map of the space.
Yeah.
And that's what the memory palace technique uses to help us remember information.
Including vocabulary.
Yes.
So how does it actually work? Do we have to, like, build a palace in our minds?
Well, not literally. We use a space that's already familiar to us, like our home, our office, even a favorite park.
Okay.
And we imagine walking through that space. And along the way, we place images
Yeah.
or stories that represent the words we want to remember.
So we're connecting a word to a specific location and image.
Yes, exactly.
Hey, I can see how that would be helpful.
So let's say you're trying to remember the word meticulous.
Yeah.
You can imagine walking into your kitchen and seeing someone meticulously arranging spices on a spice rack.
I can picture that. That's a good one.
Right.
Yeah.
And the research actually shows that using visual imagery can increase recall by up to 30%.
Wow.
And the more vivid, the better.
So the weirder, the better, almost.
Yeah, the more memorable.
Okay, so we're creating these really unusual scenes in our minds to help us remember.
And you can use this technique to remember more than just words. You can use it for phrases, idioms, even grammatical structures.
Oh, wow. So anything.
Yeah, pretty much.
So like for an idiom, how would I use the memory palace for that?
Okay, let's take the idiom to spill the beans,
Okay.
which means to reveal a secret, right?
Right.
You could imagine walking into your living room and seeing someone literally spilling beans all over the couch while they're gossiping on the phone.
That's a good one. I like that. It's much more memorable than just reading a definition.
Yeah, exactly.
So all these techniques, they're not just fun and creative.
They're not.
They're really backed by science.
They are, yeah. There was a study at the University of Waterloo that showed a 25% improvement in retention when students used vivid personal imagery.
Wow, that's amazing. So we're learning about how our brains work, and we're using that knowledge to our advantage. So
Exactly.
it's not just random tips and tricks.
No, it's science-based.
Yeah, I love that.
So let's build on this idea of engaging with information in a meaningful way. Let's talk about multisensory learning.
Okay, I like that. Using as many senses as possible.
Yeah, it makes the learning experience so much richer.
It does. So we're not just seeing the word, we're kind of bringing it to life.
Exactly. We're creating a stronger memory trace.
Uses all these different senses.
Yeah, we're tapping into sight, sound, touch, even taste.
Oh, taste. Okay.
Yeah, so for example, let's say you're learning the word crisp. Don't just read it. Visualize a crisp apple. Hear the sound of that crunch when you bite into it.
Yeah.
Feel the smooth skin. And imagine the sweet, tangy taste.
Wow. I can practically taste that apple now.
Right.
You're really painting a picture.
Yeah, and that's the point. You're creating a much richer memory. It's not just an abstract word anymore.
Right. It's an experience.
It is.
Okay, so we've got spaced repetition, the memory palace, and multisensory learning.
Yeah,
These are powerful techniques.
they are. And they can be used by anyone. It doesn't matter your level, whether you're a beginner or advanced.
But we also have to talk about how to use them practically to really make these words part of our vocabulary.
Absolutely. It's not just about memorizing words in isolation. It's about using them actively
Yes.
in conversations, in writing. And that leads us to mindful contextual practice.
Mindful contextual practice. Okay, that sounds interesting.
It's about moving beyond rote memorization and using new words in sentences, stories, maybe even journal entries
Yeah.
that relate to your own life.
So instead of just memorizing the definition,
Right.
you're using the word in a real context.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
So if you love cooking, for example, you could practice new vocabulary by writing about your favorite recipes.
Oh, I like that. So you're making language learning relevant to your passions.
Yes.
Okay, and what about active recall?
Active recall. This is a game changer when it comes to memory. It's about actively retrieving information.
So instead of just like staring at flashcards,
Yeah, or rereading your notes.
I'm trying to pull that information from my memory.
Yes, you're actively engaging your brain.
Yeah.
So flashcards are a good example. But the key is to use them correctly. Don't just flip through them. Cover up the definition and try to recall it.
So you're quizzing yourself.
Exactly.
And quizzes in general are good for active recall
Oh yeah, quizzes are great.
because they force you to remember.
They do.
Without any hints.
And you can create your own quizzes using online tools or just pen and paper.
You could even try to explain a concept out loud without looking at your notes.
That's a great strategy.
So there are all sorts of ways to do active recall.
There are.
Okay.
And speaking of reinforcing those connections, we can't forget about sleep.
Okay, sleep. It's so important for, everything in our bodies and minds.
It's like that reset button.
Right. But it's also important for language learning.
It is.
I've always felt like if I get a good night's sleep, I remember things better.
It's true, because sleep helps consolidate those memories.
What does that mean exactly? Consolidate.
It's like hitting the save button
on
everything you learned that day. While you're sleeping, your brain is organizing those memories, moving them from short-term to long-term storage.
So those English words are getting an upgrade.
Exactly.
While we're sleeping.
And here's a cool thing. Research shows that reviewing information before bed really helps with memory.
So if I review some words before I go to sleep,
Yeah,
my brain will work on them all night.
pretty much.
That's amazing. So we've covered so many strategies today. Spaced repetition, the memory palace, multisensory learning, mindful contextual practice, active recall, and sleep.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is, but they're not just random tips.
Right.
They're all backed by research.
They are.
And they're used by, these memory champions, so they must be effective.
Definitely.
And what's great is anyone can use these strategies.
That's the best part.
It doesn't matter what level you're at. If you're a beginner or you're advanced.
It's all about understanding how your brain works.
Right.
And using the right tools.
Like we have this toolbox now filled with all these amazing tools that we can use to improve our English.
Exactly.
And it really gives us the power to control our own learning.
It does.
We're not just passively absorbing information. We're actively shaping our understanding.
Right. You're in the driver's seat.
So it's more than just learning English.
Yeah.
We're actually training our brains to become better learners.
In all areas of life.
Exactly. So I have one final thought for our listeners. How will you use these strategies? What action will you take today to really make those words stick?
You have the tools. Now it's time to put them to work.
Make those words a part of you.
And enjoy the journey.